Hey everybody, welcome to round 1, bout 8 of the 2019 Master Marzen competition, and today is super exciting. If you're a Texan or you know much about the Texas craft beer scene, you will understand the gravity of having these two breweries up against each other in a competition such as this. On one hand, you have Live Oak, based out of Austin, Texas, and on the other, you have Shiner, based out of Shiner, Texas. Here is my 100% anecdotal, statistic-free weigh in on the situation at hand. So Shiner is one of the biggest craft breweries here in Texas, and their Shiner Bock, which would arguably be their flagship beer, is like the saving grace for craft beer people in many day-to-day situations. You can expect to find Shiner in a bunch of restaurants, sports stadiums, quinceaneras, weddings, any kind of event you can think of. If they're going to have Bud Light, Miller Lite, Coors Light, the whole shebang of the typical, entry-level macro brews, they're probably going to have a Shiner Bock too. For that reason, I would put Shiner, probably in the top echelon of craft brews, at least in terms of name recognition, and they do make some pretty damn good beer too. On the flip side, Live Oak out of Austin might not have the same name recognition, especially with people who are not really into craft beer, but they are recognized by craft beer fans and beer enthusiasts as having put out some of the best beers in Texas over the last couple of years. Their Hefeweizen in particular is recognized as being absolutely tremendous. So, this is the first time ever that I think I've had the Live Oak version of Oktoberfest, and it's the first time in a couple of years that I've drank the Shiner version of Oktoberfest. Needless to say, this is kind of a clash of the titans as far as Texas craft beer goes, so I'm really excited to see how this pans out. Alrighty, well, if this is your first time watching a Master Marzen video, let me go ahead and give you some background. This was my idea to pit 32 of America's top craft breweries against each other in an effort to see who makes the best Oktoberfest beer in America. It's a 100% opt-in tournament. All beers that will be reviewed in this tournament have been supplied by the brewers themselves, and each round sees the beers pit head-to-head against each other across 5 criteria, being packaging design, aroma, flavor, body, and the people's choice. Okay, criteria 1, which is packaging. Let's go ahead and start with Live Oak. Now, Live Oak is interesting in that they have kept their traditional motif, the predominantly white can with the black and yellow accents on it, and the name of their beer spelt out on the can. They do this for everything, and they're one of the few breweries in this tournament that hasn't come up with a brand new design for Oktoberfest. And while some of the breweries will keep a traditional motif or some kind of thread in their packaging design and their aesthetic alive, most of them are still incorporating something that has to do with Oktoberfest or Germany. So as you can see, Live Oak is definitely the exception. When it comes to Shiner's packaging, their word mark right here is pretty much the constant from memory in most of their packaging. The aesthetic and the imagery and the colors and all that stuff can vary wildly, but the word mark is what stays the same. Shiner, on the other hand, has a lot more variety in their aesthetic. They have this word mark you can see on the front of the can that is a constant in all their can and bottle designs that I can think of. But generally speaking, the aesthetic and the imagery and the color even vary significantly from beer to beer. In this case, you can see they've adopted the typical colors of Oktoberfest, which would be the blue and the orange, and they have the kind of typical checkerboard motif. What's interesting here is it's an orange motif checkerboard as opposed to the blue, which is what you see with most breweries. When considering the criteria of packaging design and the theme being Oktoberfest, it just had to go to Shiner in this bout. So Shiner takes the lead 1-0, and criteria 2 through 4 require me to actually try the beer. So let's go ahead and get them in glasses. Alright, so criteria 2 is aroma. Let's go ahead and check them out. Starting with the Live Oak. So what intrigues me is that Oktoberfest is listed as a fest beer on the can as opposed to a Marzen. Generally speaking, that would mean a lighter body, both in terms of color and in flavor. You don't expect as many toasted malts. But the thing about it is, this smells exactly what I would expect an Oktoberfest to smell like. It has a full and powerful aroma that's absolutely packed with toasted malts. Oktoberfest is really exactly what I expect to smell in an Oktoberfest beer. Okay, let's see what Shiner has to offer. Alrighty, well, the Shiner itself is also very aromatic. It doesn't have quite as much of a toasted quality to it, but it is very malty, and you kind of can expect that. Just looking at the color differentiation here, you have a much darker beer in the Oktoberfest versus Shiner's Oktoberfest. Don't get me wrong, Shiner's Oktoberfest smells really good, but the Live Oak Oktoberfest is out of this world. It is exactly what I'm looking for in a Marzen in terms of aroma, and so they get this point, and we move into criteria number 3, tied 1-1. Alright, so criteria number 3 really is probably the most important of them all. That is flavor. So let's go ahead and see how they taste, and we'll start with the Live Oak. That is a tremendous brew. It is absolutely packed with toasted malt flavors. It has a solid bitterness to it and just enough sweet to really round out a really, really solid flavor profile. Let's see what Shiner has to offer. That's also a really tasty beer. It's very malty, and it's a little bit sweet. It has just enough bitterness to kind of round it out and to make it a full and complete beer. And I feel like in almost any other situation, it has enough to win. But the Oktoberfest is just absolutely phenomenal. No surprises here, but the Oktoberfest from Live Oak gets this point, and they go ahead 2-1, moving into round 4, which is body. Okay, so evaluating body on a Marzen is an interesting proposition. Generally, there's a couple things when I'm thinking about body that I'm specifically looking at. One of which is head retention, another one of which is lacing, and then you have general sort of thickness and mouthfeel and how enjoyable it is to actually drink the beer. So as far as head retention goes, Live Oak's disappeared, not in a ridiculously fast rate, but a lot faster than Shiner's. Even though it was poured earlier, Shiner had a head for a much, much longer time, and it had a bigger, stronger head. When it comes to lacing, the Live Oak is not lacing at all, and as you can see, Shiner has a pretty solid lacing going on this side. So while everything is tipping in Shiner's favor at this point, what it really comes down to is which is a better beer to drink and why. I'm going to have another couple mouthfuls of each so I can really break it down. So I would say that the Live Oak has a sort of medium density. It's not super, super thick, but it has a certain amount of gravity to it, and it's quite easy to drink. So the Shiner is thinner body, and it's a little bit sweeter, and I feel like that sweetness kind of rounds out the body and gives it a little bit more gravity in terms of how enjoyable it is to drink. So while I give a very slight edge in mouthfeel to the Live Oak, Shiner is also a very solid beer, and because it had that head retention, that lacing, and there's more to body than just the mouthfeel, I'm going to go ahead and award this point to Shiner. So going into the final round, we are tied at 2 apiece. Okay, so criteria number 5 is the people's choice. And this is where you at home make a big difference. For every bout in every round of this tournament, you have an opportunity to vote on which brewery or beer you prefer, and you actually can be the deciding factor in some ways. If you follow me on Instagram at Sergeant Suds, you'll see that I open polling for every single bout of every single round. In a situation like this, where we are tied 2-2 coming into criteria number 5, you basically have the opportunity to decide which beer progresses and which beer goes home. So the poll ran on my Sergeant Suds Instagram story for 24 hours, and it was neck and neck. As you can see on the screen, Live Oak slightly edged out Shiner, 51 to 49%. And for those of you playing at home, the votes were 81 for Live Oak and 79 for Shiner. I believe this is the closest decision we've had so far in the bracket. So if you're not currently following me and you haven't voted in these, I recommend you go ahead and do that moving forward, because at the end of the day, you could be the deciding vote as to who progresses and who goes home. So as I said, we were 2-2 going into this round, and Live Oak just barely edged out Shiner. Which means the behemoth of Texan craft beer, Shiner, is going home in round 1. I told you at the start of this video, it's a really interesting proposition to put these two up against each other, and I feel like the Shiner Oktoberfest is such a phenomenal beer that it would win almost any matchup. But I'll go as far as saying this: Live Oak so far is the beer to beat in this tournament. Alrighty y'all, I hope you enjoyed that. As a Texas-based beer fan, this was a huge day for me. And as I said, both of these beers are very, very good. If you can get your hands on either of them, you should definitely give them a try. But if you are in a situation where you can get your hands on some Live Oak, trust me, you need to drink that Marzen. So we are still in the early stages of round 1, and there's a lot of beer drinking to go. So if you did enjoy this, please go ahead and follow me, subscribe to me, like this video, and if you want to go ahead in the comments and let me know what you thought, if you have any experience with either of these breweries, or who you think might win the whole tournament, let me know down below. I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say. And until then, Prost.